Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski, I'll be your host for today. And before we begin, may I just remind you, if you find this podcast entertaining, useful, in any way, shape or form, empowering to your life, and you consider it to be quality for maybe someone you know, then please make sure to subscribe to the channel or click the follow button. It depends on which channel you're seeing this right now. And also don't hesitate to share it with a friend. You know, it goes a long way. It helps the podcast grow. It definitely helps me reach more people. And it's empowering, you know, in the same way as ideas could be empowering to us. And that's what we're here for. If you'd like to support the podcast in any other way, then please follow the link below. There are options there. If you'd like to suggest to me maybe a book that I should review, or an idea that I should discuss, or you just want to say hi, I'm very, very grateful for all that. And thank you so much for all of you who are reaching out to me, you know, supporting financially. It's wonderful. It's a blessing. And it's one of those reasons that I enjoy what's happening over here. Of course, there are many more, and I wouldn't really be doing it unless I enjoyed the effort. So your interaction with me is like a honey to my heart and a cherry on top of this process. And thank you for that. So in terms of our last episode of this season, I was thinking, you know, what book to discuss, because there's so many that I like to share with you. But it seems to me that the past 9 episodes have been heavily focused on our inner work, even if some of them were more, you know, down to earth rather than spiritual in many ways. And so I've decided that I'll go with that. You know, I'll continue down this path. And I've prepared for you a very special book, a very unusual book as well, which will complement The Alchemist. If you've had a chance to read The Alchemist, then Paulo Coelho's Maktub is according to the author, it's an inspirational companion to The Alchemist. And in many ways, it's basically like a collection, maybe, of short stories, ideas, and themes, concepts to ponder. It reminds me a lot of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. You know, a sort of like as if someone just took notes of certain great ideas and then shared those notes with us, which is a wonderful little. I'm just gonna write down Meditations for you as well, which is a wonderful idea. You know, I was given it by a friend who also drew a wonderful picture called The Traveler, and I was given this book for my birthday recently, and it's been a wonderful blessing. So it's one of the episodes where I'm actually gonna share with you some of the pieces from the book as I discuss it. And since the stories are quite short, I've decided that I'll share with you more concepts than per usual, but we'll see. You know, we'll see where we go. I have some ideas where to take this, and there's so much more there, and I bet the great thing about this kind of a book, you know, similar to any sort of short stories collection rather than one idea, is that obviously, especially if you are not yet decided what you like to explore, if you're sort of opened for inspiration, then an inspirational companion, you know, a book that offers you an array of different ideas rather than one particular theme explored in depth, might be a very pleasant read. I enjoy those kind of books, and from time to time I reach for them as well. So I wasn't even aware of this book as Connor gave it to me. So wonderful little miracle, I guess, for us all here. So I guess let's start. It's interesting because I will actually juxtapose two different stories today, which one supposedly promotes consistency, and another seems to oppose it, maybe, in some way. So I'll start with the first one, and I'll just read it for you. Those stories are really, really short. As you can see, they're kind of like a one-pager, so they're really wonderful to share with a friend and maybe discuss. Don't try to be consistent all of the time. As Saint Paul says, the wisdom of this world is foolishness in God's sight. Being consistent means making sure your tie always matches your socks. It's feeling obliged to have the same opinions tomorrow that you had today. But the world is constantly changing. As long as you don't harm anyone, then go ahead and change your opinion now and then, and contradict yourself without feeling embarrassed. You have a right to do that. It doesn't matter what other people think, because they'll think whatever they want to. So just relax. Let the universe turn around you and discover the joy of surprising yourself. God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise, says Saint Paul. Now, of course, I can assume that there are many different ideas that this one little story can take us to. What I'd like to share with you today is an interesting touch on this consistency idea, particularly because I'm such a big proponent of consistency. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, if you've been consistent with listening to the podcast, you'll know that if there is one thing that I do believe matters in terms of achieving whatever you strive to achieve, is consistency. Basically doing the work over and over and over again. And there is a huge power, in my opinion, that lies in the power of habit, right? And obviously anything we do over time will become a habit if we take it seriously, if we really put our effort into it. So it's interesting for me when I encountered this story that the start of the story is do not be so consistent all the time, right? And of course, this probably does not mean exactly to not keep to your word or to not keep to your habits, rather to be open for change when change is due, and also to allow yourself that flexibility. That's how I understand it, the flexibility to change not only your opinion, but to change yourself as well. And, I do struggle, and I do struggle the most with the days when I feel like I should have done more and I didn't, which is a blessing and a curse. You can look at it both ways, I guess. So reading this and thinking about it, I wrote down these ideas for you to maybe ponder. Basically, the idea that it's okay to be wrong, right? I think wisdom is a big word here. My new podcast branding that is coming up is closely related to this seeking of wisdom, which I guess I over the time realized that this is basically what I've been doing. In many ways, I explore topics that resonate with me. Sometimes they are difficult, sometimes they aren't. And I want to share it with the world so you can explore them for yourself and maybe find something you need among those pages or, annals of ideas. So the thing is here, though, you need to be, at least that's what I'm understanding from the story, that you need to be humble enough and acceptant enough of your limitation, because God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise, right? So that flexibility that you might have if you keep an open mind and a beginner's mindset, some people say, the moment you lose that, the moment you become aloof or stuck in your ways or sort of know-it-all kind of a character, you might find yourself losing the flexibility and breaking rather than flowing with the winds of change. It's this beautiful story from, I believe, Buddhism that shows that a flexible tree withstands the storm while the rigid one breaks under a strong wind. And the way I see it is the wind of change, right? The world changes all the time, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. We change all the time, mostly quite slow, but sometimes very fast. And if you're not flexible enough, if you don't have enough humility to allow yourself the space to grow into your new way of being, you might find yourself struggling against something that just simply cannot be stopped. Change is one constant that we do have in our life. And so in many ways, we might as well accept and go with it, go with the flow as it's written, rather than allow it to just trudge over us, basically, get broken by it. And for me, a big part of this is this idea that once you set your mind to something, once you have a certain idea of the future, this ideal future, or, something to strive for, a goal, you should do all you can in the circumstances to go towards it, but at the same time, you should allow yourself and the universe a space for it to just manifest the way it should manifest. And, whether you believe in God, whether you believe in fate, whether you think the world is just chaos, whatever you consider, there has to be even just a little piece of your trust in this future being manifested as the flexible openness and readiness to see what's going to happen. So for example, I might have a dream of traveling the world, and I might know someone who traveled the world. I might have, researched it. I might have even bought a ticket, but then there has to be this, even the tiniest piece of this dream being just let go of, because if I'm gonna be really rigid about my travels, I'll probably not be able to experience the same wonder of wandering as I would if I opened my heart to, stopping by and seeing that stranger crossing the street, observing how the country lives, something that I think often about when I consider this idea is how people can travel to distant places and then stay in the hotel, with all-inclusive, whatever, food and drinks and everything. And when I asked one of my friends a couple of years back, how was the country they went to, and they said they didn't really see much because they were just lounging around in the hotel. And in some ways, there is probably quality in that, and there is value in, you might be relaxing in that hotel in a way that you won't be able to relax back home. But for me, as an avid traveler and as someone that really enjoys exploring new cultures, learning new languages and so forth, I found that to be like a missed opportunity. In a way, you might even tick off of your list this country as if you've been there, but have you really been there? If you've not opened yourself up for this little bit of chaos of going out on the street and maybe even challenging yourself to order some food in a different language and interacting with a stranger or with the strange land in which you are. So, in this idea of God choosing what is foolish in the world to shame the wise, I guess the invitation for us is to, while we seek wisdom and while we strive to be better and while we try to stay consistent with our habits to make us better into the future, we should allow this space for the universe, for God to work its magic. and we should be ready and humble enough for a change of perspective, opinion, when that change is due. I don't think there would be as much conflict in the world and among people in general if we were more flexible and more acceptant of being wrong, and more flexible to change our opinions and views, especially when they are very emotionally driven. I feel, especially, in among topics such as politics, I think people, me as well, I think we lose the vision of the greater picture when we get stuck into the minuscule of the emotional turmoil that some situation might cause us to feel. So it's something to ponder for sure. Now, the second story is one that I've noted as an extreme case, to be honest. I don't know if that's exactly what the author here means, but let's see. The master asked his disciples to find them all some food. They were traveling and could not cook for themselves. The disciples returned at dusk, as dusk was falling. Each of them brought what little they had managed to get from other people's charity: rotten fruit, stale bread, and sour wine. However, one of the disciples brought a bag of ripe apples. "I will always do whatever I can to help my master and my brothers," he said. "Where did you get these?" asked the master. "I had to steal them," said the disciple. "The people I met only gave me stale old stuff, even though they know that we're preaching the word of God." "Well, you can take your apples and leave and never come back," said the master. "Anyone who steals for me will end up stealing from me." Now this is the quote that I've highlighted for myself here. Anyone who steals for me will end up stealing from me. I guess in a way it goes without saying in terms of this particular case, but my extreme idea here is something that I've shared with you before, this idea that how you do one thing is how you do everything. And in a sense, especially when it comes to truth or being radically truthful, radically honest, it seems to me that this particular story points us to ponder, invites us to ponder this idea that we should be wary of both ourselves and others in the situation when, because we feel righteous, because we feel like we're on the right side, or maybe because someone really cares for us or we care for someone very deeply, we should be wary of situations when we choose to do something that contradicts our morality, to put it plainly, is evil or bad, because despite of that, because we think we are the righteous, or we are we have the right to do so, or we are so needing of this that we do it. Here, maybe a bit more down to earth example is how people gossip. This is not to say I'm perfect, I'm not. Every now and then I have to remind you of that. If you ever jump to a conclusion that Wojtek is suggesting himself to be perfect, please don't. I'm not. I have many, many faults. Even today I made a faulty choice, and I am yet to reap its flawful benefits. Benefits as an oxymoron, I guess. But gossiping is one of those things that I try actively not to engage in. And I know that in general it seems, or at least, on average, apparently among women it's more often the way of sort of sharing information. Guys seem to be too busy with maybe more simple endeavors in many ways, Although, this is this is a great generalization. I don't know I don't know your case in particular. What I'm trying to say though is, overall, I try not to gossip. Especially, I try not to be the one gossiping about someone else. It is fair to say that from time to time I will hear someone telling me some gossips, and I might even nod or have a little laugh. But the point here is that if you see someone gossiping, or maybe if you end up experiencing someone gossiping about someone else, you might, I would argue that you should be aware of the fact that they're probably going to gossip about you at some point. People tend to do the same with, everything, in a way that this is this extreme idea, right? This extreme ownership idea that how you do one thing is how you do everything. If I see you being messy at your home, I am quite ready to assume that you will be a messy roommate or a messy flatmate or a messy travel companion. This is not to say that I am to judge. I don't mind, I have my own messes. But the point is that we should be wary of these traits, and we should observe ourselves and others closely, because the two most valuable, I think, things that we can share with one another is love and trust. And love is something you create, you build, you tend to, and trust is something you can really easily break, but it's so difficult to build it. So even though you might approach everyone with a pinch of, salt, as they say, I assume when I meet you for the first time that you are wishing me good, but I will have a certain level of, sort of maybe reluctance to fully trust you straight away. It takes time, effort, and truly time for us to develop a trustful relationship, a relationship in which I can know for sure you're reliable. And yet it is so easy to break it, right? So when this monk ends up stealing apples for his master and his colleagues, I guess his friends, what the master is saying is, since you've been stealing for us, there might come a time you will steal from us when you find a reason to, maybe because someone else needs whatever in your mind. And this is in particular, I think, really, really ripe idea for all the righteous acts and wars and protests and social activities of any kind, that if we have the right reason, we seem to manage to cheat ourselves into believing that doing something wrong for a good reason is somehow good. And, of course, we're not perfect. I can imagine I will be in many such situations in my life when I have to make a choice which might be not necessarily the easiest to do so. And I'm pretty sure you will have to too, because life is complex. But being wary of this and being wary of people's activities and just observing that, being this silent observer, not a harsh judge, but a judge of character, is something that I do believe it's something of quality and value. I wouldn't want my children, for example, when they do come, God willing, I wouldn't want my children to assume that the world is just full of wonder and no one really wishes you any harm. Because that's not true, that's naive, and in the same way, me every day, you every day, becoming a better person does correlate to this ability to discern who wishes you what, and being reluctant to fully entrust, your wealth, your health, your whatever career into someone's hands before observing how they act. And one of those things is this gossip idea, or whatever you want to put in place of that gossip. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And I do believe that to be partially, if not, almost wholly true. There is this rule from 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson, which we've explored at some point, that tell the truth or at least don't lie. And I've been, with all the effort and challenge, I've been trying to live by that rule for the past few years. And I must say, first of all, it's quite challenging, because there are moments when you're really tempted for the better good, or for someone's benefit, or for my own peace, to say not exactly the right thing, to not tell the truth. The thing is, though, you might be better off not saying anything then, in this idea of tell the truth or at least don't lie. But also, it can be quite freeing. From the Bible, it says the truth shall set you free. And I think that's the point, that when you do stick to the truth, for the most part, as Mark Twain said, you don't have to remember what you said. And so if you deal in lies, you will have to pay attention to what you've said to continue this lie. And there is a saying that lie has a short legs. That's in Polish. I don't know if that's a relevant saying here, but it's relevant in the idea behind it and meaning. So being able to observe yourself and observe others and realize that when you are in a position to make a choice that is not necessarily the greatest, and morally it wouldn't be right, although you might feel like you're righteous enough for it to be right, be reluctant to accept that idea. Recognize that your mind might be playing tricks on you, your ego might be playing tricks on you, and I think we don't have to look far to recognize the many wars that have been fought and the many people that died for a righteous cause. And I would be really, really reluctant to discern what is righteous and what isn't, because who am I to know? Who am I to judge? So, each of us has to face our own opinions, face our own morality. It's your choice what you choose to aspire to, what you choose to deal with. But this idea that if you see someone stealing for you, you might expect them to steal from you at some point can be translated, I guess, into many other aspects, and as well your own experience. So I would urge you to try and be the most extremely truthful and the most extremely cautious and careful about how you do one thing, because that's how you do everything. And, obviously this is an invitation from me to you, and something that I strive to participate in. Maybe one little digression here is this idea, oftentimes I think what my podcast is about, and oftentimes I end up with the same kind of an answer. And there are many attractive fields into which I could take this show to supposedly make it more mass driven, maybe more attractive to someone who's not really my ideal listener, but there's so many of them. It would probably be much easier if instead of doing reviews of books, I would do reviews of blockbusters. But then every time when that happens, when maybe I'm tempted because I see someone achieving a better result with their show than I do, I often remind myself of this idea that the moment I will stop doing what I truly believe to be of quality and that I actually enjoy, I have failed miserably. I might be better off financially. I might even become, a puppet for some huge corporation selling, I don't know, t-shirts here. But in the long run, I would have to abandon myself. I would have to abandon my truth. And so I wouldn't urge you to recognize that in your own activities and in your own path, because it's up to you. It's yours. So what do you really enjoy? What do you really want to do? Rather, what others will want you to do, or what fits the particular moment in the world, Now, a third story for you is the juxtaposition to the first one. It's about consistency. And this one is over here. It's an interesting one, by the way. The master says, pray every day, even if you use no words, make no requests, have no idea why you're praying. Make prayer a habit. If this seems hard at first, say to yourself, this week I am going to pray every day. Renew that promise every 7 days. Remember that you are not only forging a closer link with the spiritual world, but also training your will. It is through such practices that we develop the discipline needed for a real battle of life. There is no point in forgetting your promise and praying twice the next day. Nor is there a point in praying 7 times on one day and spending the rest of the week thinking that you have fulfilled your task. Some things need to happen at a certain pace and rhythm. Some things need to happen at a certain pace and rhythm. I guess that's the point here. Consistency, guys. We've talked about it so much. One particular idea that came into my head when I was reading this particular story is sleeping. There is so much information out there nowadays that we are obviously not treating our sleeping the way we should, and yet we do so. We don't stop. It's funny because, I hear one friend in particular, when I think about sleep deprivation, I hear him saying oh yeah, I'll sleep it off on the weekend, or there is a saying, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Sleep has really taken a hard hit, I think, in our day and age. It's fair to say that because of all the screens and because of all the stimulation, many of us, I assume you do too, might struggle to have a full night's sleep or have a quality sleep, most importantly. And yet sleep is so important, we discard it. Now, this particular story is obviously not about sleep, but it is a part of that, because I guess the point of the story is that consistency, praying, for example, every day as an idea, as a goal in and of itself, rather than, the idea of praying for 30 days and then not having to pray for another 30 days and so forth. Consistency and not perfection is what we strive here for. And, as I was listing things that this truly affects, I've listed sleeping, gym, finance, loving gestures, and learning. I bet there is many more things. So the point here is, think about it. If you're one of those people that goes to the gym, or play a certain sport, or maybe you play a certain instrument, or maybe you write on a consistent basis, whatever you do, if you have a hobby, an activity that you persistently pursue, it doesn't really work if you were to go to the gym for 1 week without stopping, and then for a whole year not go to the gym at all. You see what I'm saying? For example, imagine that you come up with this crazy idea that for the next 7 days, the only thing I will be doing is working out and sleeping. And then because I've worked out for so many hours this year, because it will amass to quite a few hours, even just a work week would be 40 hours. That's a lot of hours. And then that supposedly sorts you out for a month or a year even. The thing is, though, anyone who trains will tell you that, first of all, you're going to break your body. And secondly, you're not going to really grow, right? If you want to build muscle, it doesn't, the part it's not only that you build your muscle while you're at the gym, pushing your boundaries, but also a big part of it is the rest between the days, right? So there is a huge difference between someone who goes to the gym 3 times a week for a year, so gives themselves those days in between of the training to rest, to recuperate, to build body back, because basically during the training you're kind of breaking your body down so it can build up being stronger. And someone who would just go for 1 month without stopping and then for the whole year stay at home because they've already done those 3 times a week in their 120 hours of workout craze in 1 week. One person will reap the benefits of breaking down, building up, breaking down, building up cycle, and the other one is going to probably end up in the hospital, and that's that. Of course, this is an extreme case. You could do with something that they will not take you to the hospital, but let's say with learning, I can make a bet here, and feel free to send me an email saying that you take this bet, and let's see what happens. I can bet that someone who consistently learns something, let's say a language, 10 minutes every day for a year, will have better results than someone who learns that amount of minutes, but over the course of 1 week in January or 2 weeks in January, and then for the whole year has nothing to do with the language. The word here, the phrase here that people often point out is use it or lose it, right? So this idea that with muscles or with language, with skills in general, what you don't do over time tends to disappear, right? If you've ever worked out and were quite jacked, but now maybe for whatever reason you stopped doing that, you might see over time your body changing again back into a more lazy-like state, more weak, and your muscles will atrophy. In the same way, daily habits, they will not be daily anymore if you stop doing them daily. The whole point of a daily habit is to do it daily. And of course, this story in particular points us in the direction of the divine, right? Of this contemplation. And one of the interesting points in the story was this idea that it doesn't really matter how you do it. The whole point of it is just to do it, right? So it's not a competition. In the same way as we've discussed a week ago and before, meditation is not really a competition. There is no point to meditation, but the meditation is the point, right? There is no goal of the path. The path is the goal, as the Buddhists say. So taking this into account, I would invite you to consider sleeping, working out, training, taking care of your finances, expressing love to your loved ones as a point in and of itself, as a consistent basis idea. Become disciplined about it. Don't consider it to be a one-time investment and then for the whole year let it go. Rather, over time, allow the compound interest of your time and effort to bring you the rewards of it. And whenever you feel like you don't really want to do it, because what's the point? Remind yourself that the point is to do it. The point of sleeping is to sleep. Of course there are benefits from sleeping, but the point is just to go to sleep, to rest, to allow your body to sleep. The point of going to the gym, if you want to go to the gym, is, unless it's a fad that you're not really into, the point of it is to go there to work out, and at some point, once something becomes your habit, you will find that you don't need to remember the point anymore. You just do it. And that's the beauty, I guess, of this consistency manifested over time. Now, let's talk about energy, guys. This is really particularly interesting, especially, in relation to our last week's episode about manifestation. Let's see. Oh, yeah. In some magic traditions, The disciples spend one day a year, or a weekend if necessary, making contact with all the objects in their house. They touch each thing and ask out loud, "Do I really need this?" They take the books from the shelf. "Will I ever read this again?" They look at the various souvenirs they have kept. "Do I still consider the moment this reminds me of to be important?" They open their wardrobes. "I've had this for ages and never worn it. Do I really need it?" The master says, "Things have their own energy. When they're not used, they become stagnant, like a stagnant water, a good place for mosquitoes and decay. You need to remain alert and allow energy to flow freely. If you hang on to what is old, the new has no place in which to reveal itself." This is really particularly interesting for me. I've literally a few days ago, I've made a review of my clothes because I have a bunch of clothes that I'm not wearing at all. And my flatmate Kuba struggles with that even more. He has like 2 wardrobes full of clothes. And obviously there is always a reason to keep it, right? There is always like, there will be that one situation, or maybe, this reminds me of, but this was, there is always a reason. We're really good at coming up with reasons. That's the whole point. You're too intelligent, too smart not to find a point to what you're arguing. And I applaud you for it. It's fair, it's a good effort. The thing is, though, according to this story, and it really did touch me because I was literally discussing with my girlfriend whether or not I should get rid of, this or that piece of clothing. Energy of things, right? If you don't give space in your life for new things because you're so cluttered, whether in your opinions in the mind, whether in your physical space, or whether in your relationships, then you have no space for that new to manifest itself. And especially if you're striving for something new to happen, a good example of this is relationships. If you are still stuck on this one last love you've had that didn't work out, but you're constantly dwelling on this sort of relationship that failed, you're not allowing yourself and the universe to offer you something new because you've not moved on, right? So it's as if you stopped, and even though someone might be waiting for you down behind the corner, because you're mulling over the past, you're basically stuck. In the same way, imagine if we never took out trash, right? And it's interesting that trash is the only thing we take out. We don't consider reviewing our clothing as something that we regularly do. It's not a habit. Maybe it should be. According to this practice, it is for some. Imagine if this room right now, as little as it is, would be filled up to the brim with things. Because let's be honest, if let's assume that over the past 4 years that I've been doing this podcast, anything I've ever used, I would put here. You would not be able to see me. First of all, I don't think I would be even able to open the door and get into the room. So, of course, some things come and go. Let's put trash aside. But then there is many more. And something that really spoke to me in The Alchemist, funnily enough, is this idea that a book once written should be passed on. Because the only moment when the book actually lives is when it's read. Because the point of the book is to be read. And let's be honest here. I have an array of books here that I really don't want to let go of. And I have a dream that I will have a library in my house, which I will have, God willing. And so I have this reason to keep some of the books I have. But still, every now and then, I ask myself whether this particular book I will read again, and whether this particular book is important for me enough for it to be on that library wall, or on a shelf. And I'm pretty sure I fail at that from time to time, but it's an interesting and I would say an empowering habit to take on. How many things you might have in your room that are cluttering your room? you're never gonna touch them again. How many pieces of clothing do you have in your room that you've never, like I had this, I've given it away now, but I've had this shirt that I didn't really like. I never wore it. But because once back in the day, I think I was 16, I bought it. And because I always had a reason to keep it, it's been with me for like the past, 10 years or so, or even more. And every time it would just be put on the side, So it's like it traveled the world with me, and yet I wore it maybe once or twice. It's interesting how we allow those pieces of clothing or books or things to stay in our life just in case, because we find the reason for it. And here one important thing, I guess, to note is that I would argue that this rule applies to everything. So it applies to our ideas, our held beliefs. You can't really change your approach to money if you consider money to be evil. It's one of those opinions, ideas that you probably should let go of before you start making money and manifesting, because you're kind of manifesting against yourself. You should probably let go of habits that are bad for you if you want to let them go, so other better habits might show up. You should probably let go of some relationships, both friendly and intimate, that are not working out for you, or maybe didn't work out for you, but you're still holding them in your mind or heart. And therefore you don't have space for new relationships, or maybe anytime you meet a new person, you just compare them to your old love, and so you end up destroying the relationship straight away, because basically you're judging them on something that they cannot possibly fulfill, right? I would argue it's one of the greater sins we can do to a person is to look at them through the perspective of our previous lovers, for example. It's very difficult not to judge, but it's also something that is, it's unfair, right? How can I compete with someone who doesn't exist? Or how can I compete with someone who's at this point somewhere else, and I don't even know that I'm competing against those people? So my invitation here for you from this story is to give away what you don't need. Because remember, on the other side of you not needing it is someone else who will need it. On the other side of you giving it away is someone who will get it. And on the other side of you not having to read this book ever again is someone who will gain from this knowledge and be blessed by this book when they open it. So, in the UK, you have this beautiful tradition of charity shops. I don't know if that's the same case in the United States. I've not been yet. I know in Poland, you have just a few. But in the UK, there is this idea that, whatever charity you might be supporting, they probably have a chain of kind of shops where you can literally take all your clothes or all your things that you don't need anymore, and you give them, you donate them there, and then they are being sold, and that money from it goes to people in need. And obviously whoever buys it benefits from having that thing. And in a way, if we consider this to be the energy, it's like you transfer the energy of that thing to another person so they can, dwell with it and benefit from it. And you also leave space for new energy to enter your life. If you have a garage and you have a car inside, it's very difficult for you to find the space for a next car. Maybe it's time to let go of that old car you don't use anymore, so you will have space for a new car, to appear magically. Now, the final idea here, final story, is an interesting one, something that I really resonated with, and my girlfriend also liked it. I must say I've not tried it yet. It reminds me of a practice that we did for Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, which I'll also put down for you as an episode to explore. But the idea in that particular book was that we have an inner critic, right? We always have this voice telling us how bad we are and so forth. Now here it's something different, but quite similar. The master says, "The masters of old used to create characters to help their disciples deal with the darker side of their personality. Many stories about the creation of such characters later became famously fairy tales. The process is a simple one. You just have to place all your anxieties, fears, and disappointments in an invisible being who stands on your left side. He acts as the villain in your life, always suggesting ideas you would prefer not to have, but end up having. Once you have created such a character, it becomes easier to ignore his advice. This is extremely simple, which is why it works so well." Now, this is, my dear listener, is something really, really fun. I do resonate with it because I remember how when I was writing my books, I remember the inner critic and how I was dealing with it. And how I was imagining it to be. I even wrote one story about the inner critic as a sort of this little gremlin that just stands by the door and judges me and offends me all the time. Now, this particularly seems to be a good idea because, let's be honest, it's very difficult for us to recognize that we are not our thoughts. I guess this is the whole point, or one of the many points of meditation and awareness, or gaining self-awareness, to realize that whatever you're thinking right now is not necessarily who you are, right? There is a deeper being within you that is having those thoughts, rather than those thoughts having you, unless obviously you act upon them and you do something, wrong, for example. In many ways you could say that you become possessed by those thoughts and ideas then. Maybe that's the whole idea of God's possessing us, when in Greek mythology there was this belief that you had a god of war, Ares, who would manifest within you when you were angry, when you were furious, and you would have the goddess of love, Aphrodite, when you were feeling in love, when you were feeling some sort of intimate connection with another. So taking this as the ideas and putting it into one little gremlin maybe, or whatever you imagine it to be, like a little villain from a cartoon or something, I find it to be quite an interesting idea and quite a fun one, like the moment you perceive it as a separate entity and the moment you put all your bad, all the faults and all the fears and all the limitations you have, and you just cram it in that little gremlin of yours, I feel like you can sort of distance yourself a little bit from these thoughts, ideas, and limiting beliefs. And I would argue, let's see if it works. I would urge you to try it for yourself. I would argue that it's in many ways the same approach that one takes when they are writing and when they face their inner critic head on, maybe by writing about the inner critic. I guess we should be absolved by our bad ideas, and we should definitely not be too harsh of a judge towards ourselves when we fail in the way we think, or when we judge someone. And so instead of self-flagellating, instead of hurting ourselves, we potentially could explore considering that separate entity to be someone you criticize instead, and you allow them to criticize you without them actually affecting you, or without you feeling too bad about yourself about it. Now, as a bonus, I felt like I'm gonna share with you this one idea, and it's particularly beautiful for me because, as I've told you again and again, I do believe in higher power, in special awareness, God, whatever you want to to call it, I do think that there is a part of our godlike spark which we are experiencing, and I feel like our inner awareness, that awareness which you can observe when you're really truly meditating or when you're really truly in the flow state. There is this story that the book, I didn't find the story, I have it somewhere there, but I thought I'll just tell you it in my own words. So imagine now a flock of birds flying at a sunset. Now, my question to you is, how many birds did you see? Maybe you might say you've seen 3 birds, maybe you've imagined like a full flock of birds, maybe like 7 or 8, 13, whatever. Whatever you've imagined, the idea from the story is you've made these birds appear and you imagined them, but it was up to God or chaos or the universe to decide how many of them you've seen, because you've not made a conscious choice of how many you will see. And that struck me as a really beautiful, beautiful concept. In many ways, it allows for both the free will and the destiny idea. So as we've explored it again and again, it seems to me that we are balancing in between these like somewhat stringent pathways, but at the same time, we have the ability to move within them. So in any given moment, you are given a certain set of opportunities, and your free will allows you to choose among these, even though they are limited. And so God has set you on that path, and you choose which route you're gonna take. And I found that really, really beautiful. So all in all, I would definitely recommend. I would recommend you to first read The Alchemist, to which I will put the link below as well. I think in many ways, once you read The Alchemist, this becomes a really fine piece to add. But of course, in and of itself, this book is definitely worth it. Let's leave it at that. I don't want to dive into yet another rabbit hole of ideas. I feel like I don't want to spoil too much. So in terms of the season coming to an end, don't you worry. I don't really think there's going to be much delay before the next new adventure unfolds. We are coming closer and closer to the 200th episode, which I am aware of. I must say I'm still figuring out how exactly I want to celebrate it, so bear with me on that. I'm gonna be doing rebranding soon enough, so I will also be struggling with remembering not to call the podcast the way I'm used to calling it. So that's going to be an interesting habit to unwind in relation to our first topic today. And as per usual, guys, as I said before, if you find this episode useful, if you've enjoyed it, then please follow, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend. Feel free to send me a message, comment below, or maybe just follow the link below and see for yourself whether you'd like to share with me some ideas through email. I am very, very grateful for all of you that do. And it makes my day for sure. It's one of those things that when it happens, it's yet another wonderful miracle. Now, the invitation for this week is quite a spacious one. Since we've shared 5 different stories, and since 5 different stories had 5 different ideas to explore, my invitation for you is consider choosing one of these and try to put it into practice. Whether it is to be more humble and open to change and to be flexible with your opinions, or whether it is about not participating in gossips or taking on this challenge of telling the truth always, or at least not lying, or whether it is about being more consistent with your habits, developing new good habits and taking care of the old ones, or the energy of things. Maybe it's time you do that spring cleaning. Spring is coming. Maybe it's already here. It's hard to say in Scotland. Maybe it's time to take care of some of that stuff and donate it to charity. Maybe it's time to move that energy and make space for new. And finally, remember to try and consider your faults and disappointments and bad qualities and bad thoughts, to put it into a little gremlin, grab him by the throat and leave him at home, so you can feel a bit more at ease when you're with friends or when you're out there. So yeah, take on one of those challenges maybe. Try it for a week, a month, a year, whatever fits right. And other than that, as per usual, have a wonderful, wonderful week. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.